I started, fidgeting with my fork, trying to catch his eye across the dinner table. It feels like you're miles away, even when you're right here. Our upscale city apartment, usually a haven, felt unusually cold tonight. He looked up, his face etched with the day's worries. Babe, it's just this case. It's temporary, I promise. His words, meant to reassure, felt hollow. The distance between us had grown, filled with unspoken words and missed connections. The next day, while he was showering, curiosity got the better of me. His phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. I told myself I was just going to silence it, but there they were. Messages from a colleague, not just any messages. Intimate ones. My heart raced, a mix of betrayal and disbelief swirling inside me. It's work-related. You're being paranoid, he dismissed me later, when I couldn't hold back my accusations. His words stung, the divide between us widening. In search of comfort, I reached out to Mark, an old college friend who'd always been easy to talk to. We met at a cozy downtown cafe, the kind of place that felt like a warm embrace. Over coffee, our conversation drifted from casual catch-ups to more personal territories. He's always working. I feel like I'm competing with his job, I confessed, the words spilling out. Mark nodded. I get it. My ex was the same. There was understanding in his eyes, a shared sense of neglect that formed an unexpected bond. The very next day, my husband dropped the news of his sudden business trip, leaving me to face a lonely weekend. It's important, he said, kissing my forehead, his bags packed. The emptiness of the apartment echoed my feelings of abandonment. On a whim, I texted Mark. Dinner tonight? Could use the company. It wasn't long before he replied. Would love to. Dinner was a blur of laughter, wine, and stories. Mark had this way of listening that made you feel seen, truly seen. As the night wore on, the air between us charged with something unspoken. We found ourselves leaning in closer. The kiss happened before I could think better of it. A moment of weakness, or perhaps a search for something missing. It was comforting yet terrifying, marking a before and an after. Guilt gnawed at me in the days that followed. In a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm between my husband and me, I bought him a luxury watch. I saw this and thought of you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, as I handed him the box. He opened it, a distracted smile playing on his lips. It's beautiful, thank you. But his eyes didn't meet mine, and I wondered if he really saw me at all, or if the gap between us had grown too wide to bridge with a mere object. No matter how expensive, the thrill of the forbidden had its hooks in me deep, twisting through my heart with every clandestine touch, every stolen moment with Mark. Our secret rendezvous painted the city with shades of guilt and desire, hidden corners and shadowed alleys becoming the backdrop of our affair. Yet with each encounter, a part of me fractured, wrestling with the knowledge of what I was doing, yet powerless to stop the cascade of emotions Mark stirred in me. It was during one such secret meeting, in a secluded restaurant that prided itself on discretion, that the first crack appeared. A colleague of my husband, someone whose gaze was too keen, spotted us. The way he looked at me wasn't just surprise, it was disappointment, a silent accusation. Do you understand what you're risking? He hissed after pulling me aside, his words a cold slap of reality. I brushed him off with a nervous laugh, but his warning lodged in my mind like a splinter. Days later, an unmarked envelope found its way to our apartment, its contents spilling out onto our kitchen counter like pieces of a shattered mirror. Photos of Mark and me, captured in moments of laughter and closeness, each one a punch to the gut. Accompanying them was a note, as succinct as it was menacing. Is he worth it? Panic clawed at my throat. Someone was watching, judging, threatening the fragile facade of my life. The very fabric of my marriage seemed to unravel faster with each passing day. Another dinner, another cancellation from my husband, his words apologetic yet distant over the phone. Something came up, I'm sorry. The routine was familiar, yet it stung anew each time, fueling a resentment that drove me back into Mark's waiting arms. He was my solace, promising a future where we wouldn't have to hide, where the love we shared could flourish in the open. Tempting, so tempting. Mark's suggestion to leave it all behind, to start fresh in a place where our past couldn't taint our future, dangled before me like a lifeline. A new city, a new beginning, free from the shadows of judgment and the chains of a marriage suffocated by neglect. The idea seduced my troubled heart, offering an escape I hadn't dared to dream of. But life, with its cruel sense of irony, had other plans. As I packed for what I told myself was a solo retreat, a desperate attempt to clear my head, I found an old anniversary card from my husband. His words, once meaningful, now read like a testament to what we had lost. I love you more every day. Sorry I can't always show it. The card, A poignant reminder of the love we once shared, unleashed a torrent of confusion and guilt. What was I doing? Who had I become? The decision to come clean, to lay bare the truth of my betrayal, weighed on me with the heaviness of impending doom. Yet it seemed the only path forward, a chance, however slim, for redemption. But fate, ever fickle, played its hand once more. My husband, buoyant with news of a promotion, planned a surprise celebration for us. "I wanted to show you how much I appreciate you," he beamed, his happiness a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. The juxtaposition of our realities, his blissful ignorance against my treacherous deceit, left me reeling, trapped between the life I had and the one I was tempted to chase. In that moment, the crossroads at which I stood had never felt more stark, the choices before me more irreconcilable. To confess now, amidst his triumph, would be to shatter him completely. Yet how could I celebrate with him, knowing the shadows that lurked just beneath our joyous facade? The weight of my secrets, the depth of my betrayal, it all bore down on me with a suffocating intensity, leaving me to wonder if there was any way back from the precipice on which I teetered. The dinner table was set, his favorite dishes laid out, the scent of his preferred wine wafting through the air. It was supposed to be a celebration, a mark of his promotion, but for me, it was my last-ditch effort to see if there was anything left to save. When he walked in, the affection in his eyes, that warmth I hadn't seen in months, it hit me hard. "This looks amazing," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like it could heal every crack between us. For a moment, I let myself forget the mess I'd gotten into, basking in the semblance of normalcy. But reality has a cruel way of clawing back. That night after a dinner where we laughed like old times, I found it. An anonymous note tucked under our door, blunt and menacing. "End it with him or I will tell everything." My heart sank. The fear of losing everything became a tangible weight, pressing down on me with an urgency I couldn't ignore. The decision to meet Mark wasn't easy, but necessary. Sitting across from him in the same cozy cafe where it all began, I stumbled over my words. "Mark, I can't continue this. I need to try and fix my marriage." His reaction was a mix of disbelief and anger, a stark contrast to the understanding friend I'd turned to months ago. "So that's it? You're just going to throw me away?" His voice was low, but the hurt in it was loud. I left him sitting there, his anger a bitter reminder of the mess I'd created. I was oblivious to the storm brewing. Mark, in his hurt, had crafted his revenge meticulously. An email sent to my husband laid bare the truth of our affair, complete with photos and messages. I didn't know until it was too late. The confrontation was inevitable. My husband, usually so composed, faced me with a heartbreak in his eyes that tore through my defenses. "How could you?" His voice cracked, holding up the printouts of the email. I tried to explain, to plead for forgiveness, but the words sounded hollow even to my ears. "I can never trust you again," he said, the finality in his voice a clear signal that this was the end. Watching him pack his bags was surreal, each item he placed into his suitcase a tangible piece of our life together being taken away. "Please, let's talk about this," I begged, but it was too late. The door closing behind him felt like a closure on any hope of reconciliation. Left in the silence of our now broken home, the weight of my actions settled in. The love I thought was unbreakable had shattered, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my dignity. The news of the divorce and the battle for our pet that followed only added salt to the wound. Rumors swirled. Friends chose sides, and I found myself more isolated than ever. The realization that my search for something more had led me here, to this moment of utter desolation, was a bitter pill to swallow. Reaching out felt like grabbing at straws, each call more desperate than the last. I need someone to talk to." I found myself pleading into the phone, only to be met with excuses and thinly veiled judgments. "I'm sorry, it's just a lot right now," they'd say, or worse, "I think it's best if we don't get involved." The realization hit hard. Friends I thought I had were merely spectators, choosing sides in a battle I never wanted. Then there was Mark, the eye of this storm, showing up at my door with apologies and flowers, as if we could somehow erase everything and start over. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far," he said, his eyes searching mine for forgiveness. But looking at him only reminded me of everything that went wrong. "Mark, we can't. It was a mistake. I need to face this on my own." His face fell, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy before reminding myself of the chaos he helped cause. The day the divorce papers arrived felt like a punch to the gut. Reading through the demands and accusations, I felt my world shrink down to those pages, each word a testament to how far we'd fallen. It was in black and white now, undeniable and irrevocable. The lawyer I hired tried to sound hopeful, but even she couldn't hide the reality of our situation. "Your options are limited," she said gently. But we'll do what we can. It felt like trying to patch up a sinking ship with nothing but goodwill. In a moment of desperation, I penned a letter to my husband, pouring out apologies, explanations, and a plea for forgiveness I knew I didn't deserve. I left it at his office, a paper vessel of my last hopes. Days later, it came back, unopened, with a note from his lawyer that might as well have been a nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Mr. Carter wishes no further contact," it read. The finality of it, the unspoken end to our story, was devastating. As news of our divorce spread, I watched my social standing crumble. Invitations dried up, whispers filled rooms as I walked in, and the community I once thrived in turned its back on me. It was as if I had become a cautionary tale, a specter of infidelity and its fallout. The isolation was suffocating, a daily reminder of the cost of my choices. Each action, each attempt to reach out, apologize, or salvage what was left of my dignity seemed to only further entrench me in my new reality. The once vibrant social life I led was now a labyrinth of awkward encounters and cold shoulders. The stark contrast between my past and present was a bitter pill to swallow, a daily battle against the tide of judgment and the consequences of my own actions. Starting over isn't just a phrase, it's a relentless uphill battle, especially when your personal life scandal becomes the city's favorite gossip. Job applications turned into rejections. Each "we regret to inform you" email a reminder of the stain my actions left on my professional life. It's funny, in a cruel way, how personal choices can bleed into every aspect of your existence. In a moment of sheer desperation, I found myself on the old bridge downtown. This place, where he and I once dreamed about the future, now felt like a monument to my folly. Leaning against the cold metal railing, I watched the water flow beneath, a silent witness to the chaos of my life. What have I done? The question echoed in the empty night, the answer lost in the river's relentless current. Selling the apartment was a decision made out of necessity, not desire. Walking through each room, I was haunted by the ghosts of what could have been. The dreams we built within these walls, now just echoes in the empty space. And there, in the back of his closet, was the luxury watch I gave him, left behind like an afterthought. It felt like finding a piece of a puzzle that no longer fit anywhere, a stark reminder of a love that once felt eternal. The move to a modest apartment was a jarring shift from the life I once knew. The luxury and status I took for granted were replaced by the stark reality of my new circumstances. This small, unassuming space was now my world, far removed from the glittering social scene I once dominated. It was here, in this humble setting, that I had to face myself and the consequences of my choices. Volunteering at a local charity offered the semblance of purpose amidst the turmoil. The work was far from glamorous, but it provided a distraction, a way to fill the hours that once were occupied by luncheons, galas, and endless social gatherings. It was during one of these volunteer shifts that I met her, a woman whose story mirrored mine in haunting ways. "You're not alone," she said, her eyes reflecting a mix of empathy and sorrow. For the first time in months, I felt understood, seen by someone who had navigated the treacherous waters of public judgment and personal regret. Our conversation, though brief, was a lifeline thrown across the dark waters of my despair. In sharing our stories, we found a common ground, a shared experience that, while painful, reminded us that the path to redemption, though solitary, didn't have to be lonely. This chance encounter, a moment of connection in a sea of isolation, offered a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in our darkest hours, we can find solace in the empathy of others who have walked similar paths. The final gavel of my divorce echoed not in a courtroom, but in the hollow chambers of my heart, leaving me with little more than memories and scars. The legal documents spelled out the end in black and white, stripping me of assets and leaving me clinging to a reputation in tatters. It felt like being cast adrift in a sea of my own making, with no land in sight. The blow that truly brought me to my knees wasn't the loss of material things, but the sight of him, my ex-husband, laughing and carefree with someone new. Pictures of them, splashed across social media, felt like a knife twisting in a wound that refused to heal. Any foolish sliver of hope for reconciliation that I might have harbored was ruthlessly extinguished. He had moved on, and here I was, still trapped in the ruins of our past. Mark's departure from the city should have felt like closure, but instead, it was a grim reminder of the isolation that enveloped me. The affair, once a secret thrill, had cost me dearly, leaving a void that his leaving only deepened. The knowledge that I had to face the aftermath alone was a daunting realization, one that I wasn't sure I was strong enough to endure. Reaching out to old friends was like groping in the dark, hoping for a hand to hold, only to grasp emptiness. Each encounter, each attempted reconnection was met with discomfort and distance, The whispers, the sideways glances, the sudden change of topic when I approached, it all hammered home the fact that I had become a social pariah, an outcast in the world I once ruled. Financial woes were the next dragon I had to slay. The luxury watch, once a symbol of love and perhaps guilt, became my lifeline out of debt. Selling it felt like severing the last tangible link to him, to us. The watch, untouched and unappreciated, fetched a price that barely dented my growing debts. But it was a start. A small step towards reclaiming my independence. In the midst of this turmoil, I found solace in an unexpected place. A small, furry companion that asked for nothing but love. Adopting a pet was a decision born out of loneliness, but it gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. In its innocent eyes, I found unconditional acceptance, a balm for the wounds that seemed otherwise incurable. Venturing out into the world became a trial by fire, with every outing a potential battlefield. Overheard conversations about my failed marriage were like daggers, reminders of the judgment and scorn I faced. "Can you believe what she did?" they'd whisper, not knowing or caring that I was within earshot. Each word was a reminder of my fall from grace, a public spectacle of my private despair. In this chapter of my life, every action, every decision, was a step towards rebuilding from the rubble of scandal and heartbreak. The journey was fraught with reminders of what I had lost, but in the midst of despair, I found glimmers of hope in the most unexpected places. A pet's unconditional love, the liberation of letting go of material possessions, and the harsh but necessary lessons learned from facing the consequences of my actions head-on. The final divorce settlement landed in my inbox with a thud echoing through my already hollow heart. Numbers on a screen, cold and impersonal, outlined the cost of my actions in stark detail. Financial losses were one thing, but the emotional bankruptcy was harder to quantify. It felt like the last chapter of a book I never wanted to read, let alone live. In an effort to find some semblance of peace, or maybe just a way to fill the echoing silence of my apartment, I started writing. A blog, anonymous of course, became my refuge. Pouring my story into words felt like bleeding onto the page. Painful, yet cathartic. It was a whisper into the void, not expecting an answer, but desperately needing to be heard. To my surprise, the blog resonated. Comments trickled in, a mix of compassion and condemnation. "You're brave for sharing," some said, offering virtual hugs through their words. Others weren't so kind. Their harsh judgments a reminder of the world's readiness to cast stones. Each notification was a heartbeat, a sign that my story was out there, touching lives in ways I hadn't imagined. Then came the threat. An anonymous comment, chilling in its precision, knew my story wasn't just a random confession on the internet. "Stop writing, or I'll expose who you really are," it said. Fear gripped me, the potential of further scandal silencing my newfound voice. The blog, once a source of solace, became a beacon of danger. My days blurred into a monotony of solitude, my modest apartment a constant reminder of the upheaval. Unpacked boxes became fixtures as much a part of the decor as the furniture, each one a testament to a life in limbo. They held pieces of a past I wasn't ready to confront, yet unable to let go. One sleepless night, driven by a restless urge for closure, I scrolled through old photos. Images of happier times, of smiles that reached our eyes, flickered across the screen. With each deletion, I whispered a goodbye, attempting to erase the reminders of a love that once felt unbreakable. It was a digital purging, but the memories clung tighter with each discarded photo. The thought of starting over in a new city flickered through my mind like a faulty light bulb. The idea was both a beacon of hope and a terrifying leap into the unknown. Could I really begin again? Build a new life from the ashes of the old? The prospect was paralyzing, the fear of repeating my mistakes a chain around my ankles. In the end, it was the stark realization of my journey's toll that hit hardest. My quest for affection, for something more, had led me here, alone. The dignity and vibrant life I once took for granted were now just echoes of a person I barely recognized. It wasn't just about the marriage I had lost, or the love that had slipped through my fingers. It was the loss of myself in the process. This story, my story, isn't a tale of triumph or redemption. It's a warning, a raw look at the consequences of seeking fulfillment in the arms of another. The final lines of this chapter are written with a heavy heart, acknowledging that some falls from grace are too steep to climb back up from. The quest for affection outside my marriage didn't just end in heartbreak, it stripped me bare, leaving behind a reflection